haven't heard from Ben, so I don't know if he's coming.
We are live, Karen.
Good evening, everybody. This is Stratford Board of Education Finance Committee. It's Monday, May 24th, and we're doing our virtual meeting per Executive Order 7B, and we do have a quorum. Hi, Vinny. Let's see. I would like a motion from somebody, please, to accept the minutes from April 26, 2021.
So moved.
And that is Bob DiLorenzo. Thank you, Bob. And I need a second, please.
Second, Andrea.
Thank you, Andrea.
Karen, I do have a correction. If I could please note it, it's Pam.
Okay, in the minutes?
Yeah, under food services report, it notes that the current agreement runs through June 30th, 2022. It should say 2021.
Okay,
So noted.
Thank you.
so noted, yes.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any comments, changes, questions about the minutes?
Teresa, please hit record on the meeting.
You're muted, Teresa.
Yeah, I did. Let me see what happened. We'll try it again, but thanks, Lou. I'm getting it, but let's see. There we go.
Yeah, it says you're recording. Do I need to start over?
No, you were live during the rest of it.
You were
Okay.
lying.
Okay. If no one has any further comments or questions regarding the minutes, I'll do a roll call vote, please. Andrea?
Yes.
Janice?
Yes.
Thank you. Allison?
Yes.
Bob DiLorenzo?
Yes.
Bob David?
Yes.
And Vinny?
I wasn't here, so I'm going to abstain.
Okay. And the chair votes yes. So it's one abstention and 2, 4, 5, 6 yes. So the motion passes. We're going to move on to number 3 on our agenda, discussion, information, and possible action. Number 1 is the budget summary for fiscal year 2021. Ms. Mangini?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. I know you have your financial status report as well as the monthly financial report. And again, we're looking at April this month. As I've noted each month, as we tighten our projections, our year-end balance has increased, and we do have a significant projected year-end balance for salaries. It's something that I've reported all year with all the closed shutdowns and with a lot of employee leaves of absence, and some of them, many of them were COVID related. We also do have areas of the budget that we're still trying to tighten up, but we are projecting a balance for substitute account. You do have a couple of transfers this evening, and one of which is from the substitute balance account. So we are projecting a little bit more than $1 million in that area of the budget, but of course it is offset by some other issues. In professional services, as Heather has been reporting to you, our special ed clinical costs do continue to increase. And we are hoping to, again, straighten that out with a transfer this evening. Also, we do have the UI lease, which was an issue that we discovered early on in this fiscal year. But again, we do correct that going forward for the budget next year. So we do project a deficit of a little over $250,000 in that object code area. Under property services, which includes utilities, things really haven't gotten any worse, so that's the good news. Stratford High School, as we know, we probably didn't have the historical data to really tighten those projections for this current year. So that's where that deficit basically is coming from. It's actually been reduced a little over the last month or two, because we are trending better than expected in some of the other schools, which I think we've discussed. We know it's basically because we simply aren't having the after-school activities in a lot of those schools right now. So there are some savings that's offsetting the Stratford High School issue. Then in the 500 object code, which is probably the most significant with a deficit, even though right now it is showing a projected surplus in total. Our tuitions that fall under the 500s are definitely significantly in deficit. Again, this evening you're being asked to approve a transfer of over $700,000 for tuitions. But it is offset a lot by transportation savings, which have been considerable. Not just our regular transportation, but obviously there have been no field trips. There have been limited number of sporting events. So we have saved quite a bit, fortunately, in that area. So that is basically the highlights of the report in the areas that I think are most important to you. The rest of the accounts currently look like they're going to track pretty much on budget, just bearing in mind that the 600 object codes, which are supplies, and the 700s, we did reduce those when we had to make our budget meet the town appropriation for the current year. Overall, we're in pretty good shape considering all the variables and everything we've been through this year. So we're doing okay, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have in that area.
Does anybody have any questions for Pam? Welcome, Amy.
Pam, I do. Karen, if that's
Okay, Janice.
So, the transfers that is a lot of money, right? It's a ridiculous amount of money that we are able to move around, that we have fought to allocate in, the budget where they exist. And now we're saying these monies, we can move them to someplace else. Like, it's a lot, and I want to have the opportunity to look at what we've budgeted for the upcoming school year for those same things, because we may need to make some adjustments. Like, it's every year we're ending with a balance, and we're making all these decisions, we're making cuts and things, and we're coming in with money left over. And at least for me, the explanations aren't sufficient in my opinion. That's just my personal opinion, going through this experience. So each month we're meeting here and it's like, oh, the surplus is expected to be even more. I want us to be in a place where we're planning better for these things. Like, we can't be this far in the year and say, oh, we have $700,000 to move around, right? Like, when we're fighting for programs, it just doesn't compute. So I would love for you to, talk more about this, if you can.
I absolutely can.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to. First, I will tell you, I've been doing municipal budgeting for a very long time, and the norm is to have between 1% and 3% of your budget remaining. Now, on the town side, that's absolutely fabulous if they have 3%, over $3 million, because it goes into their fund balance. On the board side, we just give it back to the town if we have that much, which I have to emphasize we seldom do. 1%, however, is common. So that's like, for every $100 you budget, you are $99 accurate. And we have to have that flexibility of movement, because we start this process well over a year prior to planning, and things change, as they should. But I think we are very certain about our path. It's just the costs change. But having said that, I just have to emphasize with every fiber of my being that last year and this year, this board would have been facing I truly believe you would have been in the red with your budget. You have almost $1 million in expenses for special education, more than budgeted. And had we not had shutdown because of transportation, and had we not had vacancies because of the pandemic, and we simply couldn't fill them. We couldn't find tutors. We couldn't find substitutes. We are only in this position financially because of the pandemic, and that scares the living daylight out of me, to be perfectly honest. I don't feel that this board has a budget that's overstated. I feel we've just been very fortunate in the savings that we've recognized, not fortunate with the pandemic by any stretch. But I can't emphasize that enough. And I know Dr. Robinson has had far more experience than I have dealing with this kind of budget issues, and I'm sure she can confirm that. I do believe that in Stratford, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, you had a lot more money in your budget, but I don't feel it's a very loose budget. I think it's a very tight one.
And I appreciate that feedback and, those commentaries, but those reasons you gave are, they make sense for the pandemic, but in previous years we've had surpluses again. So it's kind of like a pattern, and I'm looking for how are we controlling that? Because yes, it's normal to have 1 to 3% left over, but it's not okay when to do that, you're having to cut things and take away from the kids. Do you see what I mean? So I would rather not have anything left over in order to have proper programming and support for our students. That's where I'm coming from. That's what I'm looking for, information on, and how can we get to that place? Not that it's okay to have a surplus. Like, I'm not fine with a surplus when we're talking about reducing programs, increasing class sizes, do you know what I mean? It just doesn't, it doesn't make sense to me.
Denise, and I'm not okay with that either. I understand totally. We've had some aberrations in the last few years, but prior to these 2 years, and then the last year where our former COO left and we had difficulties with spending, we have come in very close to the line of what we had. We had 4 or 5 years running. We're very close, 4 years running, that we're very close to the line. And that's where we want to be, is close. What we always worry about and causes agita in every COO, business manager, and superintendent are what the costs are going to be for special ed, because they have been unpredictable. And so we're always holding a little bit, going, we don't know what those costs will be. And our state doesn't do the reimbursement on special ed costs they should, nor do the feds. The feds promised full reimbursement. We've never gotten that. So it's always something that keeps us awake at night. And we have to keep that in mind. We cannot totally predict that. So we do the best we can with what we know. Heather will be talking about special ed, and one of the things we do is we budget according to what we know at the time we know it, and then sometimes it works, and sometimes 154 kids move in. So I know the frustration. I've been experiencing it for 40 years, so I get it. But it's there, and we'll do the best we can as we go prepare for the next year. I do not believe that we will be out for COVID next year. We'll keep my fingers crossed. So I think we can be a little more on the mark.
Okay.
So
Bob,
when
do
you
remember?
say, hold on, sorry, let me just finish this thought, Karen. Dr. Robinson, when you say we're, for special ed, we're budgeting, based on what we know, what do we know? Are we looking at historic yearly trends to say every year we're seeing X% increase and factoring that into the budget? Because it seemed like every year we come to the meeting and it's like, oh, we under budgeted for this much. Like, aren't we using historic trends to say we're increasing it by X amount because of that pattern that we're used to seeing.
Yes, that historic patterns somehow those patterns violate all rules when it comes to this. And I think you'll see when Heather shows her graph that it has not been predictable. There's no trend. There was a trend at one time that we hung out around 9%, up a little bit, but around 9%. But now when you're jumping up to 15% or so, there's no trend here. When we have all these people that have moved into town, there's no trend here. So that's the problem we're running against. We are just trying to figure out the best we can do because we want the right services for our kids.
And I think it's just important to note that when we budget for our out-of-district outplacements, we are budgeting on known numbers. So we should always be really close in that tuition line item. Problem is, there is so much movement, and it's just not here in Stratford, it's at least statewide, where you have children moving in, moving out, changing where their program is going to be, going to different schools. We are constantly battling with that. And something we don't do here, which we'll strongly recommend in the future, is to budget for unanticipated placements. We budget based on the students we know at the time because our budget is so tight, but the districts I've been in the past, we've always added at least one or two unanticipated placements because that number is going to change. And Heather will give her report, of course, but I think she hasn't really expressed the fact that while, yes, we probably have about 10 more outplacements, they've actually, as a special ed team, have managed to bring back a number of students from those outplacements. Otherwise, we would have probably have been $2 million in deficit in that account. So it is such a difficult area of the budget to really get your hands around. And Dr. Robinson is absolutely right. That is why we do hold back at the beginning of the year, because I never want to have to come to you. I'm not saying it'll never happen, but I never want to have to say, we can't cover special ed. There's not enough money in the budget. And I've had the same discussion last week with the Town Liaison Committee. I am really pushing for them to provide us with that full carryover amount from last year in that education reserve fund, because I see that as our safety net for special ed. It won't be significant, but it will be. I mean, it wouldn't be $1 million, but it was at least 700,000, which would really help this board know that there is a backup plan if we can't handle it from our budget.
Karen,
I'm sorry to be long-winded, but you can tell.
Karen, I'll be done. I just
area.
need to say one last clarification. Like, this wasn't a question of, a knock against special education at all. It's regarding our entire budget and the process and our line items. So I just want to make that clear that that's where my questions are coming from.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bob
Thank you.
Lorenzo, it's your turn.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. Actually, to go off of what Janice said, the special needs situation, there are our kids. So there are kids in our community, and they're the same kids as we have in any case in our districts. So I know there's a lot of talk around it, but I kind of wish it would kind of slow down. In terms of, I just think the verbiage is a little rough sometimes, especially with those folks that have kids with special needs. Pam, you've been put in a tough spot. You've done a good job, but going off of what Janice said, again, I think with the carryover money that we've had in the past, and I know you're going to say we probably were in the red or we could be in the red. The bottom line is, I think for myself, not speaking for others, when we make cuts and we have to make cuts, we would like the teachers, obviously, to be the last cut, because in reality, we all know if we're in it for the kids, we know the biggest impact is the teachers. So when we're mentioning teachers, it impacts our kids, it impacts our parents, and it impacts our community. So, you know,
I'm gonna stop, Bob, I'm gonna stop you there because that's a different topic than what we were discussing. And we can reserve that for when we get to that section. Is that okay
what
with
section?
you?
What
When
section?
you're talking about teacher layoffs and things like that and what not to cut.
No, Karen, I got the floor, so give me 1 second and then I'll finish up. The point of the matter is what Janice had stated prior to, and then I'll go back to what she had said. We're doing these things with really no vision of doing them. So the projection is that we have this money left over, then we don't know. And then we're coming back to special ed and saying that, well, we don't know what the costs are, we don't know this, we don't know that. So I think we have to take the, again, humanity piece of it all is what it is. And I ask that all of our leaders that are in the office of, you know, Miss Mangini, Dr. Robinson, really look at it hard before we make any decisions. And thanks, Karen.
Okay, one final comment on this little section is, in our budget, is anybody ever given any consideration to having a special ed contingency line delegated specific to special ed? Because to me, that would be a part of the solution. The other part of the solution, Janice, and
I just need you to repeat that because my internet went out, Karen. I couldn't hear what you said.
I'm asking in our budget book to have a special ed contingency specific line. And also I'm asking that board members contact the state delegation to again apply pressure to have the burden of proof shifted away from the boards. I know it's not going to sit well with some people, and I'm sorry, but it's just very, very difficult. And that's that. But I'm going to move on. Bob David, your hand is up.
Yes. So I just wanted to give you, on the contingency is a great idea, but I would just don't handcuff yourself and call it a special education contingency, call it a contingency. And Pam can recite the law that now allows the town to hold that special ed money into reserve, which we're doing now, which we can do, and the town can give it back to us. Years ago, you had to spend every dollar. That has changed, and Pam just went over that before. So it's a great idea, but when you're going to cuts, here's where it gets into going to Janice's point. So are you going to cut 2 teachers or instead put $250,000 into a contingency? I will tell you, it's popular not to put money in contingency, but to keep the 2 teachers' jobs. So just FYI on that.
Okay. Denise, you still have your hand up?
Yes, I just put it up. Thank you. Again, this is not a special ed discussion. This is about our overall budget, and it doesn't look good when we're sitting in these meetings and we're bringing up the cost of special ed as a reason for, you know, cutting something or moving something, or like we need to do a better job because it doesn't look good, you know, when we're talking about special ed like this. You know, we need to better project, and there are other line items that can be lowered and then say, oh yes, that's where we need to move money to, but we need to make sure we're properly estimating for special ed. And Pam, the example you gave about other districts factoring in 1 or 2 placements, that goes in line with what I was saying, looking at that trend. And I understand some years it might be 15, some years it might be 2 in terms of, you know, students coming in, but there is a standard deviation, and we should be looking at that and at least have those numbers built into our projections. Thanks, Karen. I'm finished.
Okay. And Bob, do you have your hand up still, or is this a new hand up?
Sorry, no, I'm good.
No, I'm sorry.
I'm good.
It was Bob DiLorenzo I was talking to.
Okay.
I'm good, Magnum PI.
Well.
Okay. Bob David, go ahead.
I just wanted to address Karen and not go at the chair here, but the burden of proof, you just brought that up. a lot of our special education children are from the most vulnerable, some of the poorest children we have in town, the most defenseless. So to push the state delegation to shift the burden of proof, I think is not the way to go to handle any problem, especially financially.
Well, we will have to agree to disagree on that, and unfortunately, I think that the burden of proof really needs to be more equitable. And I'm just going to leave it there. Anyway, let's move on. Pam, is there anything else that you needed to add to your expenditure report and encumbrances?
No, I think I covered everything. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Clemmy, it's your turn. Grant update.
All right, so you have the grant report and the usual descriptions and the coronavirus relief fund update. I want to highlight three things this evening. One is ESSER 2, which everybody's interested in. We submitted that application on time, as you would expect. We have received some questions back from the State Department of Education regarding exactly, they want more detail on some of the expenses that we submitted, more detail than they usually ask for. So we've been putting that together, and we'll send that back next week, or this week actually, Monday, this week. Second one to highlight is ARP ESSER. The application for that came out today. I've taken a look at it. It's very similar in many ways to the ESSER 2 application. However, it's a multi-step process before we can even submit the application. And the state has put together a timeline, and if we follow the state's timeline, I'm not sure we can do anything else. If we follow the state's timeline, that application is not going to go in until mid to late August. So that's how long it's going to take. We have to do multiple steps in terms of community input, stakeholder input, and a variety of things, which if we had time, I was going to go through it a bit more, but I sensed that we're a little behind schedule, so I'll skip that and maybe save it for next time or offline. And then thirdly, I want to highlight a change in the two grants I highlighted on the grant report front page. And they're the two 21st century grants for 2020-2021, this year's 21st century after school grants. We had a very successful remote program for the full program year this year. Normally it's an in-person, of course, after school program. We ran it virtually for both the middle schools and the high schools. In addition to running the normal academic help, the normal activities, we also managed to schedule 40 virtual events for our students to participate in. These included a virtual moon mission, artists and performers appearing just in front of our students by special commission, museum visits virtually, zoo visits virtually. The JFK Presidential Library put on a program for us on leadership, and kids learned programming for apps. They did career exploration. So we did everything we think you could possibly do to provide a really valuable experience for these students in a time when an after-school program had to be remote. And the state apparently agrees with us because they've been collecting information specifically from the Bunnell program, but it could have been from any of the four because they were all parallel programs this year. And the Bunnell High School program is going to be highlighted in a national publication for its excellent work during this difficult year. That's really a highlight because that high school program was brand new last year and interrupted by COVID, and it's still going to be highlighted for its excellence. So it was a very successful program. But I want to be transparent. I have to tell you that COVID also caused some challenges for the programs. First of all, the full year was remote, and students are exhausted of remote stuff. They're tired of virtual school. They're tired of remote learning. They're tired of remote activities. So enrollment in the program, great as it was down 30% this year. We had 30% fewer students, and attendance was down for the 70% who did enroll. So that meant we had fewer teachers working. And in addition, COVID caused us to have a large carryover from last year because the program shut down in the spring. So all of that put together, I have to tell you that the state's going to reduce the amount of those two grants for this year only. And they're doing that for two reasons. One, because with the carryover, we had actually more than we would normally have in a year. And the other is they get a monthly report of the enrollment and the attendance, so they know we don't have as many students. And they know from the financial reporting that we've already spent 44% more per student than we normally spend. So as a result, they're going to reduce that 190 per program appropriately based on the enrollment and the expenditures to date. They're going to reduce that award. They're going to leave us enough. We had requested funds for a 2-week summer program for both the middle schools and the high schools, a leadership program. They're going to leave us the funds for those. And they've promised us that we won't have a reduction in our amount next year, even though they're taking some of the money back. So that's where we are. And so that hopefully by next month they'll make the official change, and I'll be able to put the actual number in there instead of 190,000. But I wanted to let you know as soon as I could that that's coming, and that it's coming almost entirely because of COVID and because the state reviewed the enrollment, and they can't let us spend a full year's amount plus a bunch of carryover from last year, only 2/3 of the kids.
Amy, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. Mr. Clemmie, I just have a quick question. When we are looking at the column on your grant report for SPS remaining,
Yes.
Is that something that we're going to be able to do, or is that because it's a multi-year grant?
So for which grant?
Well, all of them, because the total is $2 million of remaining.
So many of these are multi-year grants. So everything with title in it, IDEA, ESSER, those are all multi-year grants.
Okay.
And they'll be there. And with the exception of those 21st century programs, because we don't have the exact amount revised yet, I have spending plans from the program directors to spend every penny of this that ends June 30th.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thanks, Karen.
Okay. Let's see who else. Andrea.
Thank you. Would it be possible for the members of this committee to receive a copy of the ESSER 2 proposal in some way, shape, or form?
We actually did send that, our spending plan.
Right. That is what went out to the state?
Yes.
Those are the numbers that went out to the state.
Right.
The application is an online application with a bunch of check
Right. That's fine. I don't need all the
But yes, the budget that you received is the one that went into the state.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Janice, your hand is up again? Is that from before or now?
You sound like you're getting annoyed with me, Karen.
No, I'm just trying to figure, because some people
I'm
don't put their
joking.
hands down.
I know. I do have a question. So, Mr. Clemmie, the 2 that the state is going to reduce, do we know if it's the same amount we're going to be getting next year, or are they going to sort of recalibrate and that number might change? I'm just curious.
No, they told us we would get the full 190,000 per program next year.
Per program, okay. And then sort of tying to the question Amy brought up, would it be possible for us to see for the multi-year grants, just what, like 2 separate, tables, right? Like the full table like you have here, but one showing how much of that multi-year grant is budgeted for this academic year, just so when we're looking at the remaining and, the encumbrances and stuff like that, it's more, I don't know, like it just makes it's more current.
So you actually can already tell that from this table. If you look at the table, so let's just take Title I. If you look at Title I, that's in the first year, so that 304,000, if we don't spend it, is going to carry over. The next one is Title I carryover. That's the grant that's in the second year, so we have to spend that 160 by June 30th.
So you said the 304 is going to carry over into how many more years? Like we don't know, 1 more year. So these are the kinds of things I'm talking about. That's not really intuitive in the document. So I was just asking if there's another way to look at it.
We can work on it template.
Thank you.
We'll come up with
I'll see what I
something.
can do. If it come to me immediately, but we'll figure something out.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. I just want to bring up the adult ed program and the funding there, because I think it's good to once in a while kind of make that public. Now, we also provide the adult ed mandated classes for Trumbull. Is that still being done?
That is correct.
Yeah, okay. The funds that we have represented here is for the entire program, Stratford and Trumbull.
That is also correct.
Okay, all right.
Let me see, did I reduce it yet? So that actually was reduced. And I don't think we have the official approval yet, but that actually has been reduced to about 304,000, that total.
Now, that covers GED, covers the adult
GED, EFL, NDP diploma program.
Mhm.
So all of the mandated citizenship, all of the mandated courses, correct.
Okay.
And
Thank
the
you. I
reduction
just
is
wanted,
not a reduction in our grant amount, it's a reduction in the program cost. Because when you see 333,000 there, the board is eligible for about 40 to 60% of that cost.
okay. All right.
It's a reimbursement grant where the state returns a percentage.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
All right, we need to move on. We have 10 minutes before we have to wrap up, and we have to get through special ed report, food services report, and budget transfers. So we have to move kind of quickly. Is there a special ed report, Heather?
Hi, you guys. So first of all, I'll get right to it because I know you're in a time restraint. So yes, Janice, I do lots of data collection. I just sent another graph today to you guys from Teresa Lykoudis that's kind of totals everything up for you, but the pieces of this graph are complex. So there are kids that we identify as special education that become entered into special ed. We have kids that move in that are special education. We have kids that exit special education, and we have kids that move out. So the graph you received at sometime today from Teresa Lykoudis totals that. So in 2017 to 2018, we only increased special education students by 18. That included move-ins, that included kids that left. So as you can see on that graph, by the time you get to this year, the move-ins have really impacted us because we have 164 additional special education students. That's not all move-ins. Some of those are our own students that have been with us forever that went through the SRBI process and then became identified as special education. So those are all the moving pieces, including the 59 students that moved out of our district and the 31 students that we worked to exit from special education because they no longer needed the students. So it all adds up, and this is just it's not a typical year. So this isn't how the trends have been throughout the past. So, that being said, you guys, I love being the director of special education. I love what our kids bring to this district and how we can learn from them and all of their unique needs. What they come with is a requirement on their IEP, which is why I had sent the original document to you guys that showed the hours. The hours are more important than the numbers. Okay, the hours that we have to service, that dictates how many people we need as staff in order to service these kids appropriately. The better we do servicing them, the more kids will achieve their goals, be able to exit, our numbers will shift. But right now, our hours are really high in some places, and that's why I did it by school for you guys, so that you could see the number of special education teachers that school has and the number of hours they need to complete in a work week. Now, those hours are by week. What I would love to do is try to get us all the schools to a place in which nobody's working more than 70 hours, which is still a lot. That's a lot of hours, and it makes your small groups a little bigger than small group. But if we could start to shift, which I am working on with some possible transfers in our district, and then add a little bit of staff, you guys, I think we can get there. I think we can get it to a point where it's a manageable amount of hours for us to be working. But I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. This is not a normal year. I have looked at everything, the kids that have left, the kids that are coming in, the kids we've identified, and that's why on that front page graph that you got, it also kind of shows you the kids that are in the hopper, the kids that are currently having an initial that may become special ed or may not. So we have 34 additional kids that we're still waiting on to see what their testing will say and whether or not they're going to, be added to our special ed numbers. So I will try to do the best I can to make sure we have good predictions for next year. I know I asked Pam if I could sit down and talk to her about the current outplacements and talk about possibly what we can do to plan ahead. but some of the stuff you just can't plan for. I can look at the trends, but the trends definitely don't match what COVID's done to us. So I can look at the trends and say, all right, let's go back and plan for what would be a normal 2019 to 2020. But I don't think it's a good idea for us to plan for 2020 to 2021 because this just wasn't a typical year. So I'll take any questions you want, and I hope you guys know you are always able to reach out to me. I try to respond immediately if you do, and I'm happy to go through anything that's questioning. I know it's a lot, but we do have some really awesome kids in our district. So I'm glad we're able to do what we can for them.
Okay, Bob David?
Yeah, and Heather, thank you for everything you do. I just want to ask, you talked about adding staff, and for the finance committee's education, talk about how much we bring in. When you don't have enough staff, you have to pay outside sources for OT, PT, and ST, special education teachers, maybe during ESY and stuff like that. Want to kind of, I know you're on a tight time six, but a little 60-second commercial of what you're doing with that stuff.
Yeah, so I can tell you guys right now, the staff that I would be asking for would be additional special ed teachers. And the reason is because currently we are contracting outside services for OT, PT, and speech. And those outside services are being contracted through COVID money. So that is softening the blow for us right now. That doesn't mean we won't eventually need those. Kevin also got some Title I money this year that helped us out with psychologists and social workers. We're still not quite up to the amount we should have, but with a little bit of shifting, every school will have a psychologist, and some schools with higher need will have a couple social workers. And of course, we could always use more of those right now, trying to work through our own emotional stuff. But it is much more expensive to contract out. So if I'm contracting a psychologist to work in our schools, you're looking at $100 an hour. If I'm contracting a special education teacher, you're looking at $65 to $85 an hour, depending on which agency you're contracting from. So it does add up, you guys, in one way or another. The hours on the kids' IEPs need to be met. So that's also where, the cost and the clinical cost you see rises.
And that was my dovetail question on that. How far are we behind in hours for these kids right now with all the COVID going on?
We have a lot of hours to make up, Bob, but, hopefully we have a good plan in place to be able to make some hours up over the summer and to use the tutoring before and after school, or to set up other plans individually with parents to make up the hours that were missed.
Have we considered extending ESY? I know right now it's only going from July 5th, I believe, to August 8th because of all the hours these kids have missed. Has that been considered?
Yes, we're still totaling up our hours and kids participating in ESY. So we're just finishing up those IEP meetings and
just
going
speak
through
English,
all of
that's
those.
Extended school year for everybody.
Yes, extended school year. So yes, we are looking at that. Bob, we're also making up hours before and after, so extending the day a little bit and making up some compensatory hours by kids staying a little longer or coming before.
Thank you for your time.
Yep.
Okay, thank you so much, Heather. You're doing a great job. On to the food service report, please.
Yes, as you can see, this reflects February. We are showing a almost $1.4 million deficit. The lunch participation will start to look better, for particularly April and May. I met with our representatives just last week, and they do feel that things are getting better, and they do have some ideas going forward. And in June, I plan to bring to you the revised and updated renewal agreement for 1 year before we actually spend next year going and doing a formal RFP. So I'm now analyzing it, and I'm working with our third-party consultant to make certain that the fee structure that I recommend to you is most beneficial to the district.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Pam with regard to that? Bob David, your hand is up, or did you not take it down?
I did not take it down.
Okay, thank you. Amy?
Thanks, Karen. Pam, I just have a question because it's the first time I remember seeing a graph or a chart like this with February 2020 participation numbers. Could you shed some light, just because I'm curious, the vast differences in meals from school to school?
Honestly, this should say February 2021. I'm sorry, we didn't catch that.
I assumed that. I did assume
Yes.
that. But for Stratford High to be double Bunnell, just some of my questions when we look at a deficit with our food services. I'm just very curious to see who we're serving and how we're serving them. And
I would like to get you a good report and talk a little bit more with Karen Rosa. Or Karen, she and I have really delved into this, but things are so different right now that there's no norm to really compare anything to. And that's really been the biggest issue, because when you look at it, I agree, there's doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason. Why are we almost double for our meal counts at Stratford High opposed to Bunnell? And
Right,
Gina,
especially when we hear from principals about how many kids are actually there, and the struggles during COVID about families not picking up meals. So I don't know, I just feel really burdened with a cost that burdened by a cost for service that I don't feel so many people have received.
Yeah, and I will say that there are some schools that have just simply been better about having people sign up for meals on those distance learning days, and that's been part of it too. So I will get you a more detailed report of information, though, Amy, on that.
Thank you. Karen, you're muted. I think you're trying to talk to us.
Yes, I am. We need to move on to the budget transfers.
Would you like me to go through them, Karen? I can do it, I think, kind of quickly.
If you could, but after each one, if you want to stop, we'll ask for an emotion. That way we don't have to do that twice.
And of course, I'm sure you'll have questions, but a couple of these are really just housekeeping. Based on the financial audit, as I explained to you, this is now a requirement within 30 days. And it's also our standard operating procedure to always try to get these to you promptly as we can. The first one is for $87,500. We'd be taking the funding from the substitute account to a more appropriate account to pay the Today Students, Tomorrow Teachers program. Just remember that the board did approve this in their budget, and the monies to be utilized were part of the internship program. So the money's there, it just happened to be in a substitute account, which is not the appropriate place. This is really just housekeeping.
I would any discussion on that? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
So moved.
To move it to the board. A second, please.
Second.
Vinny, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Can we do this by an all in favor, Teresa, or do I have to do this by roll call?
Should do it by roll call, Karen, because everyone's not visible on the screen.
Okay, Andrea?
Yes.
Janice?
Yes.
Allison?
Yes.
Bob DiLorenzo?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Vinny?
Yes.
And Bob David?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay. Budget transfer number 2.
Karen?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Karen. For just point of order, is there any way we could do a budget? Can we discuss all of them and just do one vote at the end, 2 through 8? That way it gets solved, and you don't have to interrupt Pam all the time and get it done quicker.
Okay, we'll do it that way. I mean, as long as you has an objection, let's just move forward because we're already past our time limit.
Okay, transfer number 2, again, is just housekeeping. We started, as you recall, a new account for legal services by removing special ed from regular ed because it's for proper state reporting. We put a small amount into it initially, we transferred, you approved. Now we are needing additional monies, which is perfectly normal throughout the year. So we're requesting a transfer of funds in the amount of $64,836.97. And we're simply taking that from the regular legal appropriation.
Okay. Number 3?
Number 3 is a transfer of funds to cover some technology costs that were unexpected. Dr. Sunday has asked for a couple of items, and we thought it would be most appropriate to get him new things. And they weren't extremely expensive, but nevertheless, we did not have adequate funding in the accounts. So we're requesting a transfer of $7,687.33 to cover it. And I should emphasize it was not only for the new superintendent, it was also for some technology costs, funds rather, for hard drives and Chromebooks. sorry, I wasn't clear on that.
Okay. Number 4.
Number 4 is the one that we've spoken about, and it's a transfer of $792,000 to cover the budget shortfall for special ed tuition for non-public programs. And we are taking that funding primarily from the special ed budget within our budget, meaning savings from the summer program from last year, transportation, and some salary accounts.
Okay.
Number 5 is basically the same thing. It's special education clinical costs and evaluations for the amount of $256,359. As Heather explained, due to an increased number of students new to the school system this year, we have significantly exceeded our budget appropriate.
Okay.
Number 6 and number 7 are both transfers that we're asking you to start utilizing what we are projecting for our year-end balance. And Ed Malloy has come to you with his concerns about his really very sparse computer budget. But the problem he's most concerned with right now is what he ran into in this past year. With the pandemic, there's a shortage of Chromebooks and computer equipment, devices in general. He'd like to place the order within the next couple of weeks so that we can get things in by July. So his staff has time to retrofit and get this equipment ready to start passing out on the first day of school. He's really concerned that there's going to be a delay in getting this information. So that transfers for $200,000, and we're requesting utilizing some of our savings in our clerical and teacher substitute.
And
the budget transfer number 7, again, Heather identified a need for ELA and math curriculum at the secondary level, specifically for our special ed students. As she notes, the students must have access to grade appropriate curriculum. And it's a total of $29,778 that unfortunately was not included when we budgeted for this year, and we did not include it for next year. And the last budget transfer is for general liability insurance. It's a request for $50,000. And I will tell you very quickly that I had a meeting already with our insurance rep. Some of our deductibles on our insurance policies are high, and that puts quite a strain and quite a liability on our budget. So we are looking to minimize that, but right now we do owe $49,000 something on deductibles for a variety of cases, employment practice claims, and settlements.
Okay. All right, Bob David, since you wanted to cluster them together, would you be the one
So
to make
moved,
the
Madam
motion
Chair.
to move them to the board? And I need a second, please.
Second, Bob Lorenzo.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none. Andrea?
Yes.
Janice?
Yes.
Allison?
Yes.
Bob DiLorenzo?
Yes.
Bob David?
Yes.
Vinny?
Yes.
And Amy?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay. Then we are moving on to our next item, status update regarding the proposed budget for 2021-2022.
Like me to start, or Andrea has her hand up?
I feel we need to end this meeting rather quickly. I feel like this is a topic I'd rather have more than 2 minutes to discuss. Is there a way that we could
Agreed.
schedule a special meeting or something?
That was going to be my suggestion too.
Okay. And then we can put the enrollment update with that at the special meeting. Teresa, you'll make a note of that and we'll schedule a special meeting.
I would just emphasize that it would really be much beneficial, because by then hopefully we'll have a little more information to share with you with how we can use ESSER as well. So hopefully in the next week or 10 days or so.
All right, Pam, we'll talk for a date.
Great.
And Allison?
Quickly, that was going to be my recommendation, just because we just got the spreadsheet today of the ESSER 2 funding and that plan to spend, and I just think I know I have some questions that I was going to ask under this, so I definitely think a special meeting would be most appropriate, so we can have that as the focus.
Okay.
Karen, do we need to vote to move it to to not
Yes, we do.
take care of?
Just a motion to table, right? Is that-
And move to a special meeting. Because then you have to take it off the table. I mean, I'm not exactly sure.
No, you don't have to vote to move it to a special meating.
Yeah,
So we just table it?
you don't even have to table. it.
Don't do anything.
No.
They're just items that we
Yes.
didn't get
There's
to on
no
the
action.
agenda.
There's no action.
Okay, then I'll.
Right.
Yeah.
Then we can do a motion to adjourn. The other business we have, do we have any other old new business? Okay, the motion to adjourn.
Karen, I just want to make it clear for the public that we're going to have a special meeting on the proposed budget for next year, including the spending of the ESSER grant, just the proposed
Yes.
plan, spending plan. I don't know if that was at a different date.
Yes, Vinnie made the motion to adjourn.
Second.
And Janice is second. Andrea? We're voting.
Awesome, let's do it. All right.
Oh, yes, yes.
Janice?
Oh, yes.
Bob DiLorenzo?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Allison?
Yes.
Vinnie?
Yes.
Bob David?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you all, and I'll see you in the next meeting.
Have a great meeting.